Hi, Olivia. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. You look gorgeous as always. And
Thank you.
thank you. Where are you sheltering in place these days?
I am sheltering in northern New Jersey at my mother's house, but I am currently in my room, which I like to call my Zen den. It is my sanctuary, and yes, I'm very cozy right now.
But then, we met in person just 2 months ago in my office in Manhattan, right next to Bloomingdale's, and we're planning on doing this session to encourage and inspire women who are struggling with both infertility and cancer, and are like considering whether or not to freeze their eggs or freeze embryos if they have a partner. And COVID-19 hit, and we decided maybe we can do it sooner rather than later using a Zoom session. And you immediately said, of course, because that's who you are, inspiring people and wanted to do things today, if not yesterday, and not to wait for tomorrow. So I wanted to kind of ask a few questions because it's been several years since you completed the process, and maybe you can describe the first time you found out that you were diagnosed with breast cancer, and those weeks leading to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, how do you squeeze 5 years into under 5 minutes? Basically, I was 26 when I was diagnosed, and I was in the peak of my health. I was a professional dancer in New York City, and I was a non smoker. I had no family history, and I was a teacher at Broadway Dance Center, as well as in the middle of my professional career as a dancer. Um, and I know that because it was such a landmark date for me. I had just booked kind of like the highlight of my career. I had booked a gig to dance backup for Madonna at that time. It was like the best birthday present ever to be able to dance for her. And so that summer for my 26th birthday, I was getting ready, and we were in the middle of learning. Myself and a group of other dancers were in the middle of learning all these routines, and it was super hot and super taxing on my body. And the reason I say that is because at that time I thought that maybe I was putting extreme pressure on my body. And I remember waking up with night sweats, and I remember feeling extra fatigued. Um, but what wasn't normal was that in the middle of the shoot, I looked down and I noticed blood coming from my nipple. And that was the red flag for me that was like, okay, that doesn't come with the job description. And that was what really alarmed me to go and get checked out. And from there, things just kind of unraveled very quickly. And so I proceeded to go get checked out. It was not a simple process, to be honest with you, because I was young. And so the mammogram wasn't forthcoming, and the help that you would anticipate wasn't really as forthcoming as one might think it would be. I had to fight to get the mammogram. And with the biopsy, it didn't show and it didn't reveal breast cancer right away. I was a stage 0 from what the doctors could tell. And then even after doing a mammogram 3 times, they still didn't find everything. And it wasn't until I had a double mastectomy that doctors were able to find a tumor in both of my breasts. And basically from there, that was when they discovered that I was going to have to do chemotherapy, which led me to you. And they wanted to ensure that if I wanted to have children, that I would need to freeze my eggs before I did chemo. And so that's basically how I wound up on your doorstep.
So I clearly remember the day we met, because you were so young and in the peak of your career, and the fact that you had to go through all those processes to establish a diagnosis, which describes sometimes the cases in young breast cancer patients a little bit more straightforward when forward to a decade of life. But I think even that process alone shows how persistent you were and how you knew that something is wrong. And doing self-test exam and being aware of the fact that doctors don't know everything, I think led you to, in many ways, to get to the diagnosis. And when we met, now you're hearing from me that the process is going to take another 10 to 12 days. And how did you feel at that point when we met? Did you feel encouraged? Were you disappointed? Were you discouraged?
um, that's a great question. When I met you, Dr. Singer, well, let me back up. When I found out that there was going to be another round in the ring, I felt absolutely defeated. I felt like, how is it not enough that I've already, in my mind, had to have pieces of my body mutilated? That was how I felt. And now I have to have my hair fall out. And then at 26, I have to get my eggs frozen. Like, I wasn't even thinking about children. I just wanted to go dance for Madonna. Like, nothing was registering with me. And I was tired. And I think that's the part that maybe doesn't get recognized by enough people who don't have to deal with this process. And that's the key word. It is a process. And so there was all this pressure, and I felt like I was disintegrating under it. And I felt defeated, but it is an endurance race and it's not a sprint. And the second and the moment that I was welcomed by you, and by your staff, your entire staff, I just felt so encouraged, and I felt so lifted up, and I felt so supported. And I felt like I wasn't alone. And I was renewed and I was refreshed, and I was like, okay, I have people to hold my hand, and I have people to walk me through this, and I felt like I can keep going, and I'm going to be okay. And I don't know about babies yet, but when I'm ready, I know who my dream team is going to be. So
And that, I think, is a very important point when you come into the first consultation with your fertility doctor, and the team is well aware of what you're going through. I mean, we can only try to imagine everything that's going on in your mind at that point, and we're trying to explain the processes in bullet points, and then going in details. And I remember speaking to a nurse practitioner at the time, the sonographer, and we were overwhelmed by the fact that this had happened at a young age. But we knew that will give you hope. And here we are 5 years later talking about family and future. And that's exactly what we envisioned that first visit. And I think that, having you absorbing all of that and telling us you're going to be walking this around this road with us is giving us also a strength to go through that. What's the most difficult part during those 2 weeks of self-injecting yourself with hormones and coming for those monitoring in early morning appointment? Do you remember something that stands out?
Well, maybe not everyone can relate to this, but I am an artist, as you guys can probably see in my room. So I'm not a morning person. uh,
I think we cut some slack there, and you're coming at the 10 instead of 7 a.m. some of those days.
and the quarantine is teaching us all that 2 p.m. is the new 10 a.m. So maybe I'm not alone now, but yes, I would haul from New Jersey to New York City every day at 5 a.m. and I would be greeted by your staff, and they would have these like lunch lady looking caps on, and they're like, "Good morning, Olivia," and they're so friendly, and I'm just like,
Actually, 7 a.m.
Yeah, that was very interesting for me. Um,
And how are the injection when you're doing them at night, in your room, in the same room that you are now, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will tell you that it started out really challenging. I will never forget the first day that the box arrived on my porch.
Mhm.
Um, I came home from this like charity event that I was singing at, and I was in this like tight red dress, and I just walked up to my porch and I kicked the box like a total brat. I was like, ugh, I don't want to see you guys. And I was just, I was not very happy about it because, like, who wants to shoot themselves? And um, this lady at my church said something to me, and it really stuck with me and it ministered to my heart. And she said, Olivia, every single time that you inject yourself, you have to speak a blessing over your life and not a cursing. And so it stuck to my heart, and I was like, wow, she's so right. And every single time I would inject myself, I would like say a prayer, and every single time I would inject myself, I would, it sounds silly, but I was like, you know what, like, this is for your child, this is for your baby, you know, God bless the doctors, you know, thank them for being there early in the morning. And so I was constantly like speaking a blessing over my life, and it just switched the narrative.
Good. And were you in pain at all during this process? You know, during the stimulation, during the retrieval, after the retrieval?
To be honest with you, no.
That's what most patients say. Bloating sensation, you know, maybe mood swings, you know, some, you know, obviously it's not comfortable to inject yourself in the belly.
I'm always emotional.
So you can't blame me.
My
And
uterus was a little heavy.
I,
And then when one of the girls told me that I wasn't going to be able to work out, I was like, "What? What do you mean?" So that was a little
yeah.
challenging, but
So really, that's kind of like leads me to the next question. What was the hardest part in this process, and what was the most encouraging or, you know, supporting point in that process?
not being able to be physical was the hardest part for me. um, because you feel like you don't have any control over what's happening to your temple.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the absolute hardest part of my entire journey through cancer. Um, and I talk about that time and time again in my poetry book. But I will tell you on the upside that, you know, the more I went on, it's like the more you recognize that you're not really in control anyway. um, and the more you kind of let go of that control of your body, the more you gain control of your spirit and of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like a renewal and a reset, and it's like where you're losing control in one area, you're gaining control and you're gaining strength in another area. So
Yeah.
it's just, you know,
And
you
those who don't know you, I mean, you're an artist, you're a dancer, you're a singer, you know, you have your podcast and YouTube, and you dance kind of like 3 times a day, you know. So not being able to do this activity, breaking your schedule, I think is clearly one of the difficult challenges for very active people like you when they come and they have to do your egg freezing or, you know, IVF or what have you. So I think that that outlines, you know, some of the struggle. And the fact of the matter is that 1 out of 3 patients who are diagnosed with cancer, whether it's breast cancer or leukemia or lymphoma, who come to do fertility preservation, they decide to go ahead to decide after they come, they talk about the process. They'll just either because of chemotherapy having to start soon or because they're overwhelmed by the process. Those are, you know, the statistics that we get from the data. And I think that Stephanie went through helps more women choose the route because, you know, most cancers are curable at young age, and most breast cancer are curable. And then 5 years later, when you come back and, you know, whether you decide to become a mom, Mr. Right, and want to explore those options, once you started chemotherapy, sometimes it's much more challenging. And I think that that's where really egg freezing helps. And you now said it, you know, you're not ready to talk to me yet, but you're close to it. And today that were 5 years ago, when you're 25. And it's very difficult to go beyond that. The breast into, you know, into your 30s or into the fourth decade of life. So it's important to at least outline the process so people, it's not painful, It's
Right.
tasking on your body. Yes, it's tasking. It delays sometimes treatment, but if your doctor confirms and approves you, it's safe. What would you like to tell young women who are diagnosed with breast cancer? As you know, it's one of the more common cancers in the United States. One out of 8 is diagnosed with breast cancer, and 10,000 women in their 30s are diagnosed with breast cancer and seeking fertility preservation.
Oh.
Question, I know.
That's a good question. Oh, and the sun, it's like even the sun is putting me under pressure. um, sorry, it is so bright in here. What would I want to tell young women who are undergoing breast cancer? I would want to tell them to get a really, really solid support system around them immediately. And I would want to tell them to
Find the
surrender.
right team that can help them go through this.
Yeah. I mean, getting a solid support system. I'm sorry, I have to move this. I feel like I can't even think with that. There we go. Okay, now I can see. I would want to tell them to get a solid support system around them, and I would want to tell them to just in their fight. Part of that fight is surrendering, like trying to be in control all the time. Because I think that is half the battle. It's like, clinching on to control every little last thing. And sometimes the strongest thing we can do is just surrender. And that doesn't mean giving up, by the way, because a lot of people misconstrue that word. And it's like, surrendering doesn't mean giving up, but surrendering means recognizing that you cannot do everything by yourself. And it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to need each other, and it's okay to need support. And that is the purest form of love, to let others love you.
And did it give you, you completed the process. How many eggs did you freeze total?
I believe 26, if my memory serves me right.
That's correct. And when you went on to start the treatment after that for the breast cancer, did it give you hope? Did it encourage you, knowing that you could that process, knowing this is behind you, and even if therapy reduces your ovarian reserve or jeopardizes your chance of becoming a mom, at least you took that step before?
Oh, 100%, 100%. It is such a amazing feeling to know that I did that. And a lot of people watching this who maybe don't know me and don't know my story, just 4.5 years after being diagnosed the first time, I got diagnosed the second time this past October in 2019. To have that as I don't even know what the right word is, but just to know that I have that security after everything that my body has been through, and all the treatments and all the surgeries and all the medications. And I'm a young woman. I'm only 30, and it's like, of course I want children, of course I want a family, and I still have that as an option.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very securing and comforting to know that I made that decision at 26.
And many women will choose to use the eggs in different ways. I mean, some would wait until they're completely clear and get their oncologist to clear them to conceive. And obviously, the eggs can be frozen all the way to until you're age 50. So we have 20 more years to try and talk about family. Some choose to use a gestational carrier, and while they're struggling, with the hormone treatment, tamoxifen, or other treatment that is now prescribed for 5-10 years, they can come up in different ways. So I think that's important. The news is that the PET scan came back right, and that you're in the right trajectory to recovery, and more dances and many more books, right, and writing songs and inspiring so many people, including myself. And you know, it's been really, I mean, humbling experience also for as a physician to walk this path with you and to do this process and to see how strong you are and not everyone takes it the way you did and are comfortable with sharing their story to help other, women who are struggling. And I think a part of the difficulty is not being able to talk about it, not being able to share it with friends and family, and almost be shameful of the fact that have to do it. So I think that that's half of the healing process right there. Just acknowledging that you have a strong team next to you and you have the support system. And anything else that comes to mind? Can you tell us a little bit about the chapter in the book, in your poetry book that you wrote about the process?
Yes. I thought you'd never ask. So the name of my book is called The Show Must Go On. And it started as just journal entries in 2015 because I didn't know how to cope with being in bed because I am a mover and a shaker and I couldn't even brush my own teeth. And that was really hard in the beginning. And I remember coming home after about 5 days of being in the hospital for the first time, and my mom was like trying to help me get out of bed, and I was like, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. And I went into the restroom to try to brush my teeth, and I just basically dropped everything and started crying, and I was like, I totally can't do it. And that's a great example of what I'm talking about, like the surrender moment, and I was like, I have to ask for help. And I also realized that like I wasn't going to be able to dance 8 hours a day 6 days a week with Madonna, but I could do other things. And so I was like, if I can't dance, then maybe I can write. And so I started writing, and they were basically just love letters to myself and to my team. And you were quickly at the forefront of that team. And Molly, who was, like your right hand at that time. And so just quick backstory, and I'll try to tie it up, but I'll never forget, it was raining really hard the first day I came to see you. And I was like, well, isn't that appropriate? I'm like, of course it's raining. It's raining on my life. I felt like Jim Carrey. Like I need
Yeah.
a hat. And so I wind up coming, and I'm sitting in this little cafe across from your office, and I start writing this poem because I'm like, I'm not ready to go in, I'm not ready. And I finally muster up enough courage to come inside, and I meet you and I meet Molly, and I just crumble in her arms, and I crumble in your arms, and I'm like, oh man. I'm like, all I remember thinking was, you're such a teddy bear. I was like, I
Big
can,
hugger. COVID-19 is not a good time for me. I know.
man, I don't know how your patients like don't hug you because you give the best hugs. And I was like, I could totally do this. I could do this. And immediately after leaving, I went back to this cafe and I finished writing the poem. And can I read it to you?
Yes, please.
Okay, cool. So my angle is all messed up because the sun decided to shine differently right now. But okay. So this is from The Show Must Go On. And it's called Isn't Manhattan Pretty? And it says freezing my eggs. So it goes like this. Isn't Manhattan pretty in the morning when she cries? The raindrops wash away the pain she cannot hide. The angels spread their wings above the city's sky. Allow us to reflect on the seasons of our lives. Isn't Manhattan pretty sometimes when she cries, as she stirs up our thoughts and brings in a new tide? For the clouds are simply dancing somewhere up above, while I'm just down here splashing in my dreams and love. Isn't Manhattan pretty, especially when she cries? I'm learning it pours hard right before the light.
I love that song.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Olivia. And
So
you need to be so inspiring, and a big, big virtual hug and a kiss from me.
you too.
Peace.
Thank you for always being the light, Dr. Singer. And my last real words are that COVID, no COVID, cancer, no cancer, anybody who ever walks through your doors would be blessed to be in your presence, because you make the process very humane and loving.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll meet in New York very soon, okay?
Okay. All right.
Bye.
Bye.